Today, I want to talk about 3I Atlas. And if you don't know what that is, it is a large interstellar object that is currently approaching Earth. And the reason I want to talk about it is because there are quite a few anomalies that have been observed by astronomers while looking at this object. It has gotten quite a bit of attention because Avi Loeb has called it out and said that he thinks that there's a 40% chance that it is of intelligent origins, so that it could be some sort of spacecraft sent here by another civilization. And I think the more and more that we learn about it, the more that seems like that could be the case. So what exactly is going on with it? What is strange about those things that we have observed? And what do I think is actually going on with it? The first thing about 3I Atlas is the size and mass of it. So typically when you see a comet, they're usually fairly small, especially the ones that we have witnessed coming Interstellar. To be fair, that's not a very large sample size, right? 3I stands for the third interstellar. So just getting that right off the table. But the ones that we have seen previously have all been pretty small, right? Like a regular smaller comet. This one is the size of Manhattan, which is pretty weird. That's pretty large. But then on top of that, it's also extremely heavy. So the thing about that is, yes, these things are usually fairly heavy anyway because they have a bunch of dense metals like iron and nickel, and which we'll get into on my next point. But they have a bunch of heavier metals usually in them, so they are quite heavy to begin with. But this one is even more so, which makes it weird, right? Because normally you would think the other stuff in it is, yes, it has these metals, but then also it'll have like dust and it'll have water, frozen water, so ice, right? Not actual water, but it'll have ice, frozen ice on it because space is very cold. And so that's the thing with that, is that this looks different. And then the nickel, the next point is that it has a high nickel content, and it's either absent of or very low on iron. This would be akin to if you were making chocolate chip cookies, or if you had a jar full of chocolate chip cookies, and then when you open up the jar, there's only chocolate chips in there. That's literally what having an object like this with a very high nickel content and no or very low iron would be like. So to say that's strange is a bit of an understatement as well. And in fact, here on Earth, usually you only find nickel like that in things that are created by humans. So if you were to imagine that we would create, and not saying a spacecraft, because this is, that is, we're not making spacecrafts out of nickel. But if you're talking about an alien civilization, and through whatever means they've come to for interstellar travel, they have found that nickel is the best thing to build their entire spaceship out of, well, then that would make sense, right? They machined a craft, and once again, this is speculative, but giving the alien interpretation of it, if they created a craft out of nickel, that's what this would look like. And so the fact that you're missing this entire element that usually goes hand in hand between iron and nickel is very strange. The next thing about 3I Atlas is that it is very reflective and uniform. So typically, and we're going to practice a little bit of art here just to kind of demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about. So typically when you're talking about a comet, what you're looking at is you're not expecting to see a perfect circle, right? This would be strange. But typically if you're thinking like a comet, it's more like this type of thing, right? Because what it is it is made up of a bunch of different elements, and they've all formed together into a ball. And there's chunks, there's going to be parts that stick out, and they're going to get weathered differently, and you're not going to see a perfect circle or any sort of smooth object in space, because it's going to be hitting against other things, and parts are going to break off, and there's a lot of reasons why. But this essentially is very weird, and this is more typical of what you're going to see. So just once again, the fact that it is so smooth is very strange. And the other component of it is how shiny it is, how reflective it is. It's very strange from other objects. It literally is shiny like a brand new mirror. And so when you're seeing that, once again, it's just another irregularity. Like, it could be a component of it being created out of nickel. But if you're thinking, once again, back to my previous point, my most recent point, and you're saying it was machined out of nickel, well, then this kind of goes hand in hand with that, where you're saying, okay, it's a machined surface, so that you would expect for it to be smooth. Imagine if we were creating a spaceship, right? Our spaceship wouldn't be rough and bumpy like a typical comet. We would want it smooth to reduce drag and allow us to go as fast as possible with as little energy as possible. And that's why this being reflective and smooth, these two things go together to say that looks even stranger. The next thing I want to call out about it is that it has anomalous luminosity and self-emission. So this is something that, if you're to think about it, it has its own light source. And the thing that is strange about that is that it glows by itself. Most things, if we see light from it, it's usually that it is the light from the sun bouncing off of it. And that is how we view all objects. You, me, everything. Is that their light bounces off of it, it reflects out the color that we see it as, and it absorbs the other colors. And so what you're seeing is a reflection of light on everything. But what is happening here is that, yes, obviously there is going to be some reflection of light, but absent of that, it has its own light that it is emitting. And so it's like if you were to plug in a night light and it turns on without plugging in, and parts of it are shining weirdly from inside of it. So what could possibly do that? Once again, turning to the alien narrative, if you're thinking about that, well, it could be the engines on it, which we wouldn't necessarily see as much. And that's why it might be a little bit of a glow, right? Is because it's behind it, so we can't see the full engine light. It's being obstructed. Could be some sort of bridge of viewing, right? Some viewing deck. They have to have windows or something, so you're seeing a light that is being created from the inside. It's just, once again, it's another anomaly that seems very strange. And unlike any other sort of object, interstellar or even comets within our own system, or asteroids within our own system, it's just different from any of those. Another irregularity is that it has a backward ion tail and a sunward plume that has no thrust. So what does that mean? Basically what happens is, and we'll use illustration once again, if you think about a comet, you're saying, okay, here's my comet. What is the typical, imagine it in your head. What do you think of? It has this tail, right? Think of a shooting star. You see the shooting star, it has the body of it, right? That's the main component. And then it has the tail streaking off to the side. What is going on here is this is the body of the comet, and then this is the tail. This is what is happening here. This is called sublimation. But what is causing this tail to occur is this is basically things burning off of it. So like on a shooting star, it's basically being destroyed in the atmosphere. There is whatever components of this comet, and it's basically burning up. And so what's happening is layers of it are shedding off. Typically, you're thinking dust and water, right? So ice and dust that's holding it together. These are breaking off, they're burning up, and that is what is creating this tail. That's what you're seeing is those components of it, and it could be other metals and stuff as well, right? Those components of it breaking off and burning up in the atmosphere or in space, right, by the sun's heat. That's more or less what you're seeing with a comet tail. The thing is about 3I Atlas that its tail goes out this way, which is incredibly strange, right? This is completely different than anything we have ever observed. And not only is it going this way, which is the direction that it's traveling, so it's going this way, its tail is pointing out in front of it, which is wild. But then also, it's not creating, so this tail is not creating thrust. Because, once again, in the standard model that we typically would see, this comet, if we were to see this, we would say, oh yeah, it's going this way, right? It's going to the left, because what's happening is everything is burning off of it, and that is propelling it the other way. All this stuff is burning off. It's exploding out material from the back of it, right? That's what we're seeing here, is material typically is exploding out the back of it and causing it to go that direction. But instead, that's not what's happening. It is going the opposite direction. And the only explanation I can possibly think about that is that this is a force field. Because think about it. If you were a spacefaring civilization and you had, imagine this is your spacecraft, and there's a bunch of stuff out in space, just stuff floating around, right? There's tons of comets, there's tons of asteroids. If it hits your ship, right, as you're going through space, and a rogue comet comes and hits you, you're going to have a bad time. It's going to hit your ship, and you're dead. You're no more. You're gone. So what you want to do is you want to protect that from happening. You create your force field, and now the comet just glances off of you, and you're safe. You are a happy spaceship. To me, and if you were to master that technology and you could project it in front of you, I would imagine you could do that without any sort of thrust, right? Because you're still thrusting and or measurable thrust. So you're projecting a field, I would imagine, because it's basically, if you listen to like anything with Bob Lazar, it was using gravitational forces to create the thrust for the spaceships that we supposedly have. So if you're thinking about that, then you say, okay, then why couldn't they just project gravity in front of their spaceship to clear the path of any debris that could cause damage to their spaceship? And again, it's measurable thrust. So it's not saying that it's having no push on the object, but instead that whatever thrust it's creating on the other side of it, right? So if you're saying the engines are firing in this direction, and we just can't really see them because they're not creating a giant tail, but it's just, low energy thrust, well, that is strong enough to continue it moving very fast in the other direction, and that this field is not impacting it and sending it the other way. And or the other thing that I have always thought is that that field could actually be pulling it through space, which is very interesting, right? Because if you're thinking about it, if you're using gravity, like, yes, you could use gravity to propel and send it forward, but then you could also use gravity to pull in a direction as well. So you think about, because we think about it in terms of combustion engines, because that's what we've created, where you create an explosion at the engines, right? You think about the rockets, you have an explosion that launches the rockets up into the air. But it's entirely possible that with this other technology, what it does is it creates a gravitational force in front of the ship that pulls that ship through space. And that could be what's going on here. That would be very interesting. So is that what's going on here? Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm just trying to explain kind of what is going on with this. And this is one of the things I thought was the most interesting, because that's where you're trying to think about all the things of like, okay, what could this possibly be? And how would you explain what you're seeing? Is a tail that's out in front of this interstellar object and is not creating any thrust. So two things in one that are just radically different from anything that we have observed in the past and what physics tells us is possible. So once again, just very interesting, and was one of the things that kind of made me the most curious. Like, I think Avi Loeb, actually, when he was talking about it, said it would be as if you saw a cat coming towards you and then you saw the cat's tail coming out of its head. Like, that's how strange this is. Very weird. Very weird. So I think one of the most interesting things, and one of the things that made me the most interested in it, and kind of left me struggling for like, okay, what are we seeing here and what's actually going on? And then the other thing about that too is that, and this is just a tack on point to that, is that it was pointing towards the sun. The next thing that's interesting about it is that it has and this goes hand in hand with my previous point, but it has no non-gravitational acceleration despite outgassing. So outgassing is essentially that tail. That's what causes that tail that I was describing before, right? Coming off of the comets usually, right? This object. You're seeing stuff being shot out of it more or less, and it's not changing anything about it, right? It's not changing how it's moving. It's not changing how fast it's going. It's not making it wiggle, right? Because usually what happens on a comet as it's going through, so what you would typically see from a comet going through space is that if it was going by, it's literally stuff ejecting off of its surface. And its trajectory can change based on, basically it springs a leak coming out the side. So instead of going straight, it goes, there's some water vapor shooting out of it. So that could change its trajectory slightly, right? This is not doing that. So you are seeing some outgassing, which is what they call it, right? Outgassing, where there are gases shooting out of it, but it's not changing the trajectory of it at all, which it should. Again, everything that we have witnessed traditionally, it tells us that what we are witnessing should be changing its trajectory slightly. And it's not doing that at all. The next thing about it is that it has extreme negative polarization. And what that means is when you look at its light through special glasses, it acts very strange. It's not like any other space rock. And what it is happening is when you're looking at it, the light is essentially twisting in a way that we haven't seen before. So it's just when we are observing, it's one more thing that when we are observing it, it's strange. The next unusual thing is its composition ratio. So we've already talked about the nickel component of it, right? How it has tons of nickel and pretty much no iron. The other thing is that it's got way more bubbly gases like carbon dioxide, whereas typically what we would see is water. And this has very little water. Like, I think it's like 4% or something like that. Like it's an insanely small amount, whereas most comets that we would observe are mostly ice and water. And once again, that's why you're seeing that tail come off of it, is it's ice, water, and dust that are breaking off and propelling it through space, because it's burning up typically from the heat from the sun. This is, if you were to imagine it, right, you're thinking bubbly gases. Imagine soda, right? Imagine you're pouring a soda, but what you're seeing is just all the fizz, right? It's all the bubbles when you're pouring a soda, but there's almost no liquid coming out. There's like nothing, and then it's all bubbles. That's basically how this is acting. And so to me, I just look at that and I go, okay, that might be a component of where it has been created, right? Where it's coming from. That might just be how things formed in that pocket of the universe. Or, once again, it could be intelligent design, where if we were to create our own spaceship, maybe this is just how spaceships are typically propelled through the universe with more advanced civilizations, or just how they came across it. Maybe water is rare there, or maybe, well, the same thing. Like, if we are, and this is why I go there with my mind, is I say when we are, yes, there is water vapor that is burnt off, essentially, when we are launching a rocket, but we're not loading the rocket with water. And so, once again, drawing parallels between how do we do space and what that might look like in a civilization coming here, well, then you say, yeah, if it was a constructed object, you're not going to expect to see a lot of water coming off of it. So it would look inherently different than comets that we have seen regularly, right? That we normally observe. The next irregularity is outgassing at extreme distances. And this one is quite strange, because what essentially happens is that, and this one is particularly strange, because what typically happens is, here's the sun, here's all the happy little planets orbiting around it, right? This is their orbital tracks. We'll just keep it simple for now, but what you would typically see is that, okay, as you get further away from the sun, it gets colder, right? So it's hotter, closer to, colder. Common sense, right? Well, what happens is it started outgassing way far away. So it's coming in with its tail pointing towards the sun, traveling in this direction, and it's outgassing out here. Typically what causes outgassing is that it is being heated from the sun. Like I said, it's usually water and dust that's being ejected from the comet, right? So when you're seeing that, it is so far away that this is odd, to say the least. It would be as if you had ice cream in your freezer, and the ice cream in your freezer started melting while it was in the freezer. That's basically what's happening, because it is so far away from the sun that it should not be reacted upon at all by the sun. Like, there's no heat. It is the coldest, like, it's literally colder than your freezer, and yet what we would expect as melting is occurring. So it's melting, again, traditionally, how we think about it, it's melting, all these things are coming off of it, and this is happening in the freezing cold of deep space. So how does this make any sense? Really, it doesn't. And so it's very weird that this outgassing would be occurring, because, again, what is reacting? What is causing it to occur? It is at the time was so far away when this outgassing was occurring that there should be no, like, what is causing it to happen? Typically, it is the heat of the sun propelling it to go do that, right? because it's heating it, it's making the water melt inside of it, and it's shooting out in a direction, causing it to go the opposite way. So the fact that it's happening, or we think that it is happening, we're calling it outgassing, but who knows what's actually going on. The fact that it is happening out in the coldest reaches of space and coming towards us, it's a very weird thing, and just another thing that's completely unexplainable. And another thing that's quite strange about it is the Lightcurve anomalies. So it gets brighter in kind of a funny way, because as it gets closer to the sun, it's not a smooth increase like you would expect. Instead, what's happening is it's flickering, right? It's not consistent, because you would think as it gets closer to the sun, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter because the sun is shining on it, which would make sense, right? Because, okay, it's being lit up more and more and more by the sun, and so it becomes brighter, right? Because it's closer to the sun. That's not what's happening at all. What's happening is it's flickering, getting brighter and less bright, and it's not a smooth line like you would imagine. And so for it to do that, I think that pairs with what I was talking about earlier about how it has its own internal light source. So again, you're combining these two things, and if you were to try and explain it, it's just not naturally explainable. It's acting differently than what we have seen for any other comet. The next thing I want to call out is trajectory deviations and offsets. So going back to our chart here, what is basically happening is, okay, it's coming in, but instead of going the direction that we think it should go in, which would be kind of like this, right? It's kind of drifting a little bit off of the way that we think it should be coming in, right? It's actually going this way. But the thing is, out where it is, there should be nothing to influence its trajectory, especially where we were noting it. Okay, this is where it should have been. And so that would be, to kind of draw a parallel to it, this is the way we thought it should have went, but it's going off in a different direction. And the thing that's strange about that is you can imagine as if it were being pushed off its course, but there's nothing that should be pushing it. So like if you were to throw a baseball and say you were outside and the wind starts blowing, right? Or a football or whatever. You're throwing some sort of ball to your friend and the wind catches it and it blows it. Okay, yeah, okay, the wind's going this way. It would blow the ball and it's going to go this way. What's happening is that is happening, but in the vacuum of space. So it's like if you were indoors at an indoor baseball stadium, but then the ball just kind of randomly flew off of its path. And you would say, what is going on here? And that's exactly what is occurring with 3i Atlas, is that it's appearing to be blown off of its path in the vacuum of space. There's nothing that should be influencing the way that it's flying. So is it basically creating its own trajectory that is outside of what we think it should be projected, its projected path? That seems entirely possible. Just another thing that if you were to say, oh yeah, this is a spaceship, it would be much easier to explain because this action doesn't line up with anything that we have seen from any other sort of comet. The next abnormality is the high inbound velocity. So what's basically happening is it's coming in incredibly fast. Very, very fast. In fact, way faster than any other comets that we have observed in the past. So coming in super fast from far, far away. Basically the question on that is, what is it using as propellant? Again, a lot of it that we see in our solar system is it's stuff basically being ejected out the back of the comet. This is coming from Again, it's super cold. So typically what would happen is there would be outgassing occurring, and it's, that's what's causing it to accelerate, because it's stuff being shot out the back of it. This is coming from space at very high speeds. So the first thing is about that is, if you were to say, okay, how does this make sense at all? Well, then what I would explain it as is, there has to be some sort of, this is where it just makes more sense that it's a spaceship, because there's nothing that should have propelled it like that through the universe from outside of our solar system. And also at the speeds, because we have all of these different, particles and elements in our solar system. So you would think that there was, at some point in time, all this time that we've been monitoring everything in our solar system, we would have seen some other sort of, as we went out and we were taking all those pictures of Pluto, we noticed a comet way out in that area going very quickly through, towards the center of the solar system or something like that. You would think that, but that's not what's going on at all. And so, because it just doesn't make sense, right? There's nothing to spark that reaction, causing a comet, I guess out there it would be an asteroid, to become a comet and shoot towards the center. There's nothing happening out there. It's all cold, it's all dead, it's way out at the outreaches of our solar system. There's nothing triggering any sort of reaction like that to happen. Because otherwise, it's that law of an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion. And so if it's out there and nothing's acting upon it, well, it's not gonna just suddenly sputter to life and zoom off in a direction super fast. That's just not, that doesn't make any sense. So very strange what we're seeing here. And really, it's like a race car coming in from another galaxy. It's just moving way faster, and it's coming from some place that we wouldn't expect. Because if you're thinking about it, if you're going from one solar system to another, really the propellant for every solar system is the sun, or suns, multiple. Some solar systems have multiple suns. That is what creates all of the energy in that system. Once an object gets far enough out, like our little comet here, if it were to escape, and it's actually going out this way, well, at some point in time, it just runs out of energy. And yes, it's a vacuum, so it will continue on its trajectory, but it's not going to be going that fast, right? Because the other thing, too, is there's gravity pulling it back towards the sun, and so it's not going to typically achieve. This is why there are so few interstellar objects, is that everything wants to be pulled in towards the sun. Everything. And that's what keeps all the planets in orbit. That's why the planets don't just continue getting further and further and further away from the sun, is that they're being pulled back by gravity. So to achieve escape velocity and at the speed that 3I Atlas is going is just incredibly uncommon and unthinkable, to be quite frank. So it's just very strange that we're seeing it coming inbound at that speed. So to me, I go, well, then it's a spaceship with its own propellant, right? And it is creating its own speed. Because the comet, to me, the comet explanation just doesn't really make much sense. The next interesting thing is that it has retrograde trajectory alignment. And basically what that means is that it's flying backwards. So typically, what would happen is all the planets go the same way. So you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, the planet is going this way, the planet is going this way. They go at different speeds, right? But they're all following the same path. They're all rotating in the same way at different speeds based on where they are, their composition, etc., etc., etc. But what this comet interstellar object is doing is it is going the opposite way. It is going this way, which is extremely uncommon. And what that could be is it could just be a coincidence, but typically all of the comets go the same way. So you would expect it to go that way. It would go the same direction as all the rest of the planets. It gets pulled in the same way and it does the same thing. This is very uncommon. Once again, this is not what we would expect to see. This is what we expect to see. So just very, very uncommon that it's going basically the reverse of the way that it should be going. And then along with that, typically what happens is you have your planets, right? They're all fairly in line, right? If you think about your typical picture that you see of, and this is their orbiting paths, all the pictures of the solar system that we have, all the planets are aligned. And that's basically how they are, right? Because if you think about it like Saturn, right? If this was Saturn, the solar system does a similar thing, right? All the planets, if you think about basically the sun is Saturn, what happened is at some point in the history of our solar system, it probably looked like Saturn, where it was, okay, here's the sun, and then it's just rings coming off of it of dust and metal and water vapor and, you know, ice and all this kind of stuff. So it's floating, all of it is floating around the sun. And so what happens is then planets form, all that stuff coalesces, it comes together with its own gravity, it creates its own little gravity in there, and it pulls matter in, starts orbiting around the sun, and then eventually it collects enough matter to create a planet, and that's what happens. So, but the point of it is all of the planets are floating in a direct line or very close to it. So in line, flat, right? There's not like a planet that's, you know, orbiting sideways around the sun. So the thing about this as well, not only is it going the opposite direction, reverse of the planets, the way the planets are going, but it's also directly in line. So we'll draw our little buddy out here. It is traveling directly in line with all the way that all the planets are going. So when you're looking at that, what are the odds that it's coming in and traveling the exact same plane, so along this line of where all the planets exist, versus coming in from some other angle, right? It is coming in from a diagonal angle. It is coming in, like it could literally come in from any direction, and it's not doing that. Why is that? It's something like I think I saw it's like a 2% chance, 4% chance, something like that. It's a incredibly minuscule chance that is coming in along that path that just puts it perfectly in line with all the planets. And once again, if you think back and you say, okay, why would this occur? Well, if it was a spaceship from another solar system and it was coming into, okay, let's look at all the planets in this other solar system, this is 100% what you would expect. Oh yeah, it wants to look at all the planets and see what's in this solar system. So it's going to fly perfectly on the trajectory of where all the planets are going to be. That just makes sense. So once again, it is a very unlikely probability that has occurred that aligns perfectly with what you would do if you were an alien civilization trying to figure out what is going on in this other solar system. And the reason this is strange is it would be like finding a fish swimming upstream in a tiny creek. And that's the thing is like, okay, yes, you have an example of that with salmon, but that's not a super common thing that you're seeing, right? Normally everything goes downstream. And the other thing is, along with that, not just that it's in line, right? It's flying perfectly in line with where all the planets are aligned. But it's also going by all the planets perfectly. So we have our object out here, our interstellar object. And what it has essentially done is it's coming through and it's going by all of the planets perfectly. What are the odds of that? Similarly to how, okay, not only is it on the same plane, right? So it's not flying in from some weird direction, but it could have come from anywhere. How did it know, or how did it so perfectly align that it just happened to take the perfect trajectory to go by every single planet? How is it not just happened to come by and, one of them happens to be over, way down at a different point in its orbit? Like, the odds of it aligning perfectly and flying by these planets on the trajectory that it's taking, and they didn't end up being anywhere else as it flies by. They're all perfectly aligned in its path so that it can check out each of these planets is weird. It's strange, to say the least. So, just happens to be on the same plane, happens to be going by each of these planets perfectly as they're going around the sun. It is all line up. It's a little fishy to me. Seems a little bit strange. And the next thing that was weird is that back in the 70s, there was a radio signal that we were able to pick up on. And it's called the WOW signal. And essentially what happened is we got this radio signal coming from this area in space. And that's exactly where this interstellar object is coming from, which is insanely strange. That's almost like if someone called you and said, you're going to get a package. You weren't sure who was calling you, but you got a call and they said, here comes a package. And then 50 years later, here comes your pack. There's a package at your door. And the thing is, these distances are so far apart, it could take quite a while to get here. So if it was using traditional forms of thrust, more traditional, right? We're not talking like wormholes and like immediate interstellar travel, right? We're talking about traditional, okay, we're sending something out into space and then eventually it'll get there. That is what makes the most sense to me. So when you're seeing something that's unnatural, like the WOW signal, it might have been this civilization saying, hey, we're sending something your way. And at the time, whether we were able to actually understand exactly what was going on with that or not, just, again, it is another thing that the fact that it is coming from that direction, again, what are the odds of that, right? Super small. It's like a 0.007% chance that it would be coming from that direction in space towards us. And so at some point in time, when you're seeing all of these very small probability things aligning, you have to just go like this is just too weird. There are too many things that are not supposed to be adding up and piling up. And the next thing that's weird about it is that it has magnetic field variations. So once again, especially on an object of this size that is made up of very heavy metals, typically you have some sort of magnetic field with it. It has these variations where it has kind of a wiggly magnetic field. It's kind of complicated, but essentially it's like its own invisible force field. Like if you think about the Earth, so the Earth, right, we have a magnetic field and it protects us from solar radiation so we don't get bombarded. That's why Mars is completely barren. You don't see any sort of life on there, right? It's just the red deserty. The entire thing is that its magnetic field was basically blown away long ago. So the fact that this has a magnetic field and that it's not acting the way that we would normally envision it to is another thing that kind of causes us to question it. It's strange. But if you were doing interstellar travel and you wanted to protect whatever this object is, you would probably need some sort of at least weak magnetic field to fend off that cosmic radiation. And speaking of it being made up of weird things, it has star-like compounds. So there's planetary-like compounds and there's star-like compounds. And the stuff it's made up of looks more like bits from a star than a regular comet. And it has been theorized that, okay, it may be because it's been essentially, bombarded with cosmic rays, and so over a super long period of time, maybe that's why it looks like this. Or, once again, it could be created. And it just so happens that what is easiest for interstellar travel, those components look more like what is made up in a star. And or creating your own gravity. Some part of creating and getting this object here requires components like star-like materials that are typically not found or are not very common in planetary creation. And the next thing that goes along with that tail that I was talking about, like I was saying, the tail is weird. So the tail was pointing out in front. So our interstellar object was going in a direction and the tail was out in front, which was very strange. But then, all of a sudden, the tail has now reversed. So now, it is looking more like a regular comet. And it has done this basically as it was passing by the sun, which once again makes you go, huh? Because what you would think is, okay, maybe this tail, once again, could be some sort of force field or gravitational field that it's creating that is protecting the actual object. So maybe to protect, maybe what this is it is to protect the object from solar radiation. Maybe that's what this tail is. Again, just trying to come up with hypotheses for why we're seeing this. Because once again, the thing that is the most strange about this is that it's not consistent. It's not like the tail continued to be out in front the entire time. If that was the case, yeah, okay, it's still very, very strange, but at least it's consistent. So when you're seeing something like this flip, and now it's behaving more like a comet, that makes it even more weird to me. Like, please explain to me how that makes any sense whatsoever. So the flipping of it, if it's consistently weird, then at least it's consistent. But when it's inconsistently weird, now I need an explanation. I need a photo of this thing, because there are a lot of really strange things happening that no one is able to explain. And along with that flipping of the tail, it also has accelerated. So when it came by the sun, and this is kind of the thing that we were looking for when it was coming out, is that because it went behind the sun, we couldn't see it for a little bit, but then when it came out, we said, okay, we expect that it'll continue on this trajectory and it will continue at a certain speed. It has changed both of those. So the trajectory has changed slightly, and then also it has sped up pretty significantly. So it's as if, okay, it's coming by, it's going by the sun, and then step on the gas because there's nothing to, we've already seen all the planets, and now we want to get to the second half of what we are trying to view, or what our objective is. So it's going by incredibly fast, coming out the other side. Once again, something that to me seems very strange. There's no explanation. No one can explain it. And the outgassing has calmed down, so there's less outgassing, but it's speeding up. That makes no sense. Again, more irregularities. It's basically doing a bunch of different things that we cannot account for and we can't explain. And then the final thing that is super strange about it is that it has a core, so the middle part of it is gigantic. Essentially, that entire inner is approximated to be 30 miles wide. And that goes hand in hand with what I was saying at the very beginning, the first point that I was making about just how huge this object is. It is the size of Manhattan. So it is insanely huge. And the thing that the reason why I wanted to make the video is to lay out all the different things that are strange about it. And then, like I said, to provide what do I think this actually is. And so I was having a discussion and I was thinking about it. And to me, it seems almost unlikely that this is a comet at all. And I'm kind of torn between two things. So I think the first possibility when you're looking at, first we'll look at it's aliens. There's aliens on this spaceship. They're flying here from wherever they're from. You know, they came from their galaxy and they're on a ship. And that's what we're looking at. The problem with that is this distance that they would have to travel is gigantic. Even at the speeds that they're going at. And if you're thinking about assuming, and we're going to take a look at all of the things combined. So if we're saying the WOW signal was sent, and again, I'm going to combine, these may not necessarily mean anything together. But if you imagine that in the situation I was saying where the WOW signal was sent, and that was kind of the, hey, we're heading in your direction. So it's taken 50 years. Now, what kind of craft would be able to sustain organic beings for 50 years? That's kind of the thing that pops into my head, right? If I'm saying, or 55 years now, right? Ish. So if we're saying that it is that, I mean, yes, it is the size of Manhattan, but that's still, I mean, you would have to have an entire ecosystem inside your ship to be able to sustain any sort of actual alien for 50 years to traverse that distance. And even then, I cannot overstate how far away even the closest solar system is to us. This is so far, it's pretty much unimaginable. Like even the Earth to its moon, you can fit all the other planets end to end in between the Earth and the moon. That's how far the Earth and the moon are. That all the other planets, Jupiter, Saturn, all the other planets could fit end to end in between the Earth and the moon. So when I'm saying that the distance between our solar system and the next one is far apart, I mean like insanely far apart. It is very, very far. So like the thing is, when I'm thinking about that, is to make it from one spot to another in any amount of time, you pretty much have to somehow master the ability to either do some sort of faster than light travel. And what that probably looks like is, what is theorized is like using wormholes. So literally it's like instead of actually traveling this distance, you open up a hole in space at both sides and you literally just go in and then you pop out here. So you don't actually have to do this distance. It just literally teleports you from one. It's basically teleportation, more or less. Layman explanation. You're just folding together space. You're going in one end and coming out the other. That is one of the explanations. To move organic matter like you or I. Like if we wanted to go see the next solar system over, we would not be able to survive the time that it would take to travel. The problem is, with our current understanding of physics, it would seem instantaneous to you, but everyone on Earth would be dead when you came out this other side. Because the time would continue to moving, but it would slow down for you. So there's kind of an issue with organic travel in that way. So that's why I don't think it's actual aliens. Like little green men are not going to pull up and jump out of 3i Atlas. I don't think. It seems unlikely just because of the travel conundrum. Like it's very hard to travel these distances. And it would be very confusing, and it's very challenging to overcome. It's a huge obstacle. That's, in my opinion, that is the biggest reason why we don't see aliens. Is because they are so far away it does not matter. Like, it's impossible to figure out. The other possibility that I think is the most likely is that if you think about, and this is the way that I always said it before this object was even remotely around, is if you think about what we have done in the past, is we send out, here's Earth, we have sent out satellites to check out other planets. Like, think about when we did all those images of Pluto, right? Quite a few years ago now. But we sent out, Pluto is out here. We sent out a satellite, and it went out, and it sent us back the photos, but we didn't turn it around. So what is it doing right now? It is continuing on and on and on, and eventually it ends up in some other solar system. So I have maintained that it is likely that at some point in time we would see something like that some other civilization sent out to investigate something in their solar system, and they didn't really have a way to bring it back and stop it, and they beamed images back to their planet, and it just kept going, and eventually we'll see it. So that has been generally what I thought we would see before 3i Atlas. Now, looking at 3i Atlas, do I think that's what it is? Like, if we're comparing it to the satellite that we sent out, this is way bigger than that. It's moving way faster. So I think it's more technologically advanced. So I don't think it's just a small satellite that just happened to be coming our way because it got out of the orbit of the solar system that it was in, and now it's made its way, just happened by happenstance, to come here. And with the intentionality of it's passing all the planets, there are too many coincidences. Versus if it was, that's when you'd say, oh yeah, it just came in from a random angle, it went through, it didn't accelerate, it's just kind of on a constant speed, it's being impacted by the sun the way that we think it's going to. All these things are aligning where it just is a piece of debris flying through, and that's all it is. None of that is true here, though. So that's why I say I don't think that is what is going on in this scenario. Another scenario is it's just a comet, but there are too many things that are uncommon about this comet to think that it's actually a comet or the interstellar object, right? We'll call it that. We won't call it a comet because I personally don't think it's a comet. What do I think it is, though? What I think it is, and this is combining it with Oumuamua, which was the second interstellar object that came through. What I think happened was Oumuamua came in, and that was like the initial scout satellite, drone, whatever you want to call it, because it came in, and then it was very weird as well. It was weird similarly, not quite as weird as this one, but it was very similarly weird to 3i Atlas, where it came in and then it went out and it was going fast and it made a weird turn and there were a lot of things. So I think that was kind of like the observer, right? That was the initial. And then now what happened is now 3i Atlas is coming in. It's going through, it's surveying all the planets. And the thing is with, originally this is kind of what I thought, and I thought it could be either or, right? But I think, again, the distances traveled is just too far for it to be any sort of manned spacecraft. But I think what is happening, though, is it's coming through, it's checking out all the planets, and then because it's shedding stuff, now, it's sending out drones to each one of these as it flies by. Because it said, okay, whatever it learned from Oumuamua, it said, all right, we want some more information. And it's sending off drones to each one of these planets. And that is what I think is happening now. For what purpose, I cannot possibly say, but that is what makes the most sense. Because if it was an unmanned spacecraft, then it can go as fast as it wants through the emptiness of space. Like, the distance in between these two solar systems doesn't matter. You can go as fast as you want because there's really nothing out here. There's nothing in between. It's literally just empty space. That's what most of the universe is empty space. So it's going in between the two star systems, the two solar systems, as fast as it wants, because there's no one inside that turns into jelly. It's just electronics, an AI, whatever it is. And then it's coming here with the purpose of collecting more data, possibly finding another civilization, right? And it's probably slightly more advanced than us, but this distance in between us is gonna, for all intents and purposes, is gonna keep us physically separated. So we really don't have that much to worry about. There's no real reason for them to get to us. And this is something where I think it makes the most sense, because it could be a civilization that is similar to us in that they could create something to do this, but they aren't mastering wormholes and just traveling, literally, basically time traveling, space traveling, going in a portal on one end and coming out the other instantaneously across the universe. And they can't, there are literal physical limitations on how fast you would be able to go, unless you're leveraging gravity and you can create like a gravity hole, and there's all sorts of things where, like, okay, yes, but like how much further advanced, and then that would look significantly different. Like, you wouldn't see it if you were at that level, at the level where you can do the wormholes. You wouldn't see 3i Atlas approaching. It would just like basically pop up out of nowhere. It would be it would be very, very apparent that was what was going on. You wouldn't have some plausible deniability where you're saying, oh yeah, it's just an interstellar object, and yes, it's moving very fast, and it would be unrecognizable from technologies that we currently have. So that's just where I'm saying, why I say, okay, I think it's probably an unmanned scouting, not scouting, right? Because Oumuamua was the scouting one, but like a reconnaissance drone, more or less. So that is what I personally think is going on here, just because of all these things. Like, if you were to tell a narrative, that's why I'm kind of laying out the entire narrative of, like, this is what I think it is, and this is what I see happening, and this is why. Like, here's all my explanations, and, like, in my mind, okay, this is what adds up as what's actually happening. Am I right? Am I wrong? I guess we'll see, right? The closest it's going to be to Earth will be on December 19th. So at that point in time, I think it'll be very interesting to see exactly what happens, because then everyone can get a photo of it instead of just NASA right now, who has the closest photo and is not releasing it because of the shutdown. But yeah, either way, we'll find out in a month and a week and a half, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be very interesting. But if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, drop me a subscription below. It really does help my channel grow. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.